Welcome to the Moffett Point Marine Podcast. I am your host, Captain Devin Davis. If you haven't already done so, I encourage you to check out the introduction video. For everyone else, welcome back. My first interview is with Morris Craig. Mr. Craig, alongside his three brothers, all served in World War II, and he was the first of his family to enlist in the Marines. He served in the legendary 51st Defense Battalion before his discharge in 1946. After retiring from federal service as a clerk many years ago, he has since settled into a comfortable life here in our nation's capital, Washington, D.C., where he spends his time with family and friends and solving jigsaw puzzles. He is an extraordinarily humble man, and I'm excited to have shared his story with you. Without further ado, I present.
My name is Morris D. Craig, ex-private first class, United States Marine, federal retiree, and veteran of Foreign World War II.
Good to hear, sir. When were you born and where are you from?
I was born November the 20th, 1923, Washington, D.C.
So you're a D.C. native your entire life, and then you joined the Marine Corps. What year did you join the Marine Corps, sir?
I joined the Marine Corps July the 9th, 1943.
And down to Moffett Point and down
in Moffett Point,
in North Carolina.
In North Carolina. Well, I just quit high school because the president had passed the bill, 18-year-old drafted. So I said, well, it didn't sense me working or go to school.
Right. I'll
wait for the draft. So me and three other friends of mine, we all joined the Marine Corps on the same day.
And then, so you guys I'm assuming you took the train or you took a bus down to North Carolina?
Yeah. I was in charge because I was a year older than anybody else. The three was me, Morris D. Craig, John Huey Branham, and Walter G. McLean, all from Washington, D.C., Armstrong High School. And we joined, and I was in charge because I was a year older than most of them. I had the papers and everything else.
So let me ask you this, sir. Why did you choose the Marine Corps of all the branches?
I don't know. We all got together and say, well, we don't want to be the Navy. We the Army. So we picked the Marine, all agreed to join the Marine Corps. All the same day. And the thing about it, we stayed together the whole war.
Nice.
Us three.
You survived the war too, so that's more than against the odds. What was your job? What occupation did you have?
Well, I was a gunner, the 90 millimeter artillery, and I was the gunner or ammunition passer.
So that was with the 51st Defense Battalion, correct?
Yeah.
And then I know you guys saw a lot of action in the Pacific.
Well, we didn't see much action because our reputation carried along with us. Any job we did right. And so everybody except the 51st go do what they want to do and do the right thing. So we all left boot camp and went to training for 51st anti-aircraft outfit.
So you trained as an aircraft gunner and an ammunition handler, and then you deployed to South Pacific during World War II. Well, what was that like, sir?
Well, it was new to me because I never had any contact with guns or ammunition or nothing. Just right. Local city boy, and I didn't know what a gun or especially 90 millimeter, what that was,
Right.
So I had learned as I went along.
So talk to me about your experiences at Moffett Point. What was that like going from Washington, D.C. down to North Carolina and being one of the first African Americans to enter into the Marine Corps?
Well, I hadn't been south much, as far as Alexandria.
Right.
So North Carolina was kind of kept me on a kind of ease,
Mm-hmm.
I knew the segregation law. You can't do this, you can't do that. So I followed the rules.
And that simple.
Yeah. And stayed there. And only thing I had to work for me, the other two fellows, we stayed together. And so that helped a lot.
Yeah, having the camaraderie, especially with your brothers and your friends from back home, through boot camp and through the war, that's tremendous.
Well, we knew a lot of guys that volunteered, but they wasn't with our outfit, you know, with other outfits, you know. You know, my brother was joined, but he joined after I did. Oscar L. Craig, he was a second ammunition outfit, but he came after I did.
And then so you went through Marford Point. You went through your secondary school, or was there a secondary school, or was it all the training conducted at Marford Point down in North Carolina?
What do you mean secondary school?
Like an MOS school for training.
No, we have classes and learn how to handle ammunition and know how to load a 90mm gun.
So all the training was handled at boot camp.
Boot camp.
Very interesting. Yeah.
No, the training wasn't at boot camp. The training was after boot camp.
Okay, but it's still
we got on boot camp, and we put us in the 51st. That we get the training on the guns. In boot camp, we all did was march and preach and learn the Marine Corps rules.
Mm-hmm. So Marford Point. You went through boot camp at Marford Point. Graduated boot camp, stayed at Marford Point. And trained on the 90mm anti-aircraft.
90mm.
Okay.
Until we went overseas. Jeez. We stayed at boot camp until we went overseas.
And then, what island was your first tour?
What first one?
The first island that you visited.
I would say what you said.
The first island when you went to the Pacific.
First island was called Funi.
Funi. Okay.
In the what the island was that? But I recall Funi, sent us down Funi. We stayed there about 2 months, then they sent us to Marshall Island, you know, and we stayed there until the war, and we took training down there every morning, how to fire the gun and target practice.
So you said you were at the Marshall Islands, and I know you're probably more than aware that the Japanese had a certain apprehension to fly the area because of the...
Well, what happened, they had an air raid down Funi. The Japs came over and we attacked them.
Right.
So they say, since these boys know what they're doing, they ain't leaving this place. We were in the Marshall, and the colonel said, "What y'all did in Funi, you gonna stay here with me."
Do it in the Marshall Islands.
So we stayed in Marshall Islands till the war was over. Also, we got a citation group citation for doing a good job.
I was gonna say that there's actually a citation for the 51st.
51st, yeah.
And I got to look over it, and except the reputation precedes the battalion for the actions during that time period where.
So we stayed there till the war was over. Cause they wouldn't let us leave because we did such a good job on the last air raid. Because the outfit was we relieved. See, so many Japs came over and so many Japs left.
Right.
So since we didn't have that problem, the colonel said this outfit ain't gonna leave this outfit. So we stayed there till the war was over.
I feel mighty proud and accomplished in knowing that you guys were that successful overseas at that time.
I felt so good. All of us was about the same age, 19, 20 years old.
Right.
Because President Roosevelt just passed an 18-year draft. So we was all about the same age, and so we all got along pretty good.
That's good to hear, sir. So you joined in 1942. How long did you serve in the Marines?
Till the war was over.
Oh, till the war was over?
In 46.
Okay, and then you returned back home to D.C. What after? What did you do?
Well, I came back to D.C. I had quit high school last year. So first thing I do, go to school, get them the high school diploma. The other two guys had finished school, because they stayed in school. Well, I said, well, let me stay in school, they would draft me. So I stayed a year, and so I finished, get my high school diploma. Then I got a government job.
Okay, you got a government job, you said.
Yeah.
What'd you do?
Well, they had a job for veterans called messengers.
Mm-hmm.
We carried the messengers around the city to the federal government. So I had a job with that. And did that until clerk.
Okay. So pretty humble.
After they opened the clerk's job, I was a clerk in the desk, and I retired there, clerk.
Let's talk about life after the Marine Corps. So you served from 42 to 46. I mean, at the time, did you have? I know you had a sense of pride that you had fought in World War II, but was there a sense of pride, or was there? Did you know that you would set up a legacy as being one of the first African Americans to join the Marine Corps?
Yeah, well, I get that message, or they had, this colonel came down from the war, and he came down there and got us all on the Funa together, and we all together. And he said, when I looked up and I saw women in Marine Corps, and you people, that was us.
Right.
I knew we was at war. So that's what we got from some colonel that had been in the war.
Right.
So
they knew that basically, if there were women and African Americans, then America
the
was in
women
trouble.
was invited at the same time we were inducted, but we didn't run across the women.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So I would imagine that during the time, desegregation, the Marine Corps was the last branch to desegregate. African American Marines are showing up. I know that a lot of times the white counterparts were looking down on you guys.
Yeah.
Only because of skin color.
Well, we know we had done something. Marine Corps history was real great. We knew we couldn't keep up with that, but we did. We followed all the way through.
I wouldn't say you guys kept up with that. I think you surpassed it.
We did everything that you're supposed to do great.
I would say, speaking from a personal perspective, I knew of the Montfort Point Marines up in 912 as a sergeant in the Marine Corps.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of Marines know the name Frederick Branch, the first officer, joining sometime in about the 50s. I think in the late 40s. But the opportunities for to rise through the ranks, opportunities to serve, as a black man in the infantry,
mm-hmm.
or as a black officer, or as a black prior enlisted officer.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think a lot of people see that as being. I think a lot of people nowadays see that as commonplace, but in 1946 that would have been virtually impossible.
Yeah, well, so we knew. Only thing that we didn't have was officers. Highest rank person was a sergeant major. Black. We have no black officers.
Right.
And of course the sergeants ran the outfit. And most of them was, graduates, college graduates, and we got along pretty good.
Wait, you said your sergeants were college graduates?
Yeah, well, we no black officers.
Right. So they couldn't really. There's definitely.
We had to follow. Well, after they figured that we understood what's going on, the officers followed us to sergeant.
Right.
The officers wouldn't do nothing that it make the sergeant mad, because sergeant knew what they were doing.
Right.
And we had a tough sergeant.
Oh, I can imagine.
When you didn't go to order, you pay for it.
I think that shows a lot in terms of just the confidence that America and our senior leaders put in not you guys, but in the rank and file back in the day in those outfits, because World War II was a tremendous effort, and then to say, hey, okay, you're a Montfort Point Marine, or you're African American Marine, and you're here now, but you're serving with distinction, but you're still serving in a quasi separated role.
Mm-hmm.
But for them to say, hey, we'll put white officers in charge of you, but black NCOs, and let those NCOs run the outfit as they see fit, and you guys run it in an exemplary fashion.
Well, once we got overseas, we got together with everybody.
Okay.
So we knew it was a combination. Just that we were a black outfit, but we stayed in the Montfort Port. That's the only thing that we had. We got overseas, we got mixed up.
Mm-hmm. So
and
once
we
you're overseas,
did our job, and then we got a citation.
I think there's a saying that dark green, light green, it's all the same as long as it's Marines. So
That's right. And of course, some of the white guys accepted you, and some of them would say, "Man, what outfit, what uniform you got on? What is that?" Other guys say, "Bet you on the back, do a good job." So we had mixed feelings when we went in town.
right.
That after we left boot camp, Pope Road Seas, and white guys, you couldn't understand who we were.
I've heard stories from other Armored Point Marines, similar experiences where you will be in uniform, like in your alphas or your blues, and white people on the street, not necessarily Marines or soldiers, but as civilians, wouldn't acknowledge the fact that you were actual Marines.
Yeah, actually, some of them didn't believe. Say, you out of uniform. We MPs at these bus stations, all that,
Right.
And they come and say, "What kind of outfit you got on? I never seen that before." They never seen a black Marine. You guys started recruiting more and going more town, then they started accepting. But most of the guys, white MPs, they understand what we were wearing.
That is
They know it's a Marine Corps outfit, but they never heard of us.
right. So let me ask you this, sir. Coming home after the war was over in 1946, did people still look down on black Marines, or did the attitude change?
No, we got along pretty good. Everybody, with Muffin Point, we would come and say, "Oh, you was in the Marine Corps, yeah?" And then after 3 or 4 years, when it started mixing up, to the guys out of Muffin Point, "You what? You a Muffin Point Marine? You still around?" They thought you died off or disappeared,
Really?
So we were different, but we stayed together. If you met a guy and say, "I was training in Muffin Point, I was in platoon talking to so. We had guys in platoon coming from number 1. I was in number 8 platoon. The group.
Number 8 platoon.
98.
Oh, 98. Okay.
98 platoon. Now we had guys before us.
They were in like first platoon.
First and second and third. We had the first guy that joined the Marine Corps in our outfit. First black guy.
In the 51st.
In the first, yeah.
That's gotta be something.
He was the first one. I can't think of the guy's name, but he was a cook, and he was the first one to sign up in the Marine Corps. He was from one of the southern states,
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So going back to this Montford Point and the larger society, when did you join DC-6 and the National Point Society?
Well, President Obama passed the bill to give to a black Marine
Recognition.
Muffin Point award. Can you lift it up? That one over there.
You're talking about that one. That's the one from the White House.
Yeah, this one's from the White House. This is August 25, 2011. I send greetings to all those honoring the legacy of the Montford Point Marines on their 69th anniversary. Almost 7 decades ago, as our nation was at war, more than 20,000 African American men enlisted in the United States Marine Corps. After completing an arduous and segregated basic training at Montford Point Camp, many of these Marines served with distinction during a number of World War II's bloodiest struggles. Some made the ultimate sacrifice in these battles, others continued their service in Korea and Vietnam. Despite being denied many basic rights, the Montford Point Marines committed to serve our country with selfless patriotism. Choosing to put their lives on the line, these men helped advance civil rights and influenced President Harry Truman's decision to desegregate the armed forces in 1948. Embodying the Marine Corps motto of Semper Fidelis, or always faithful, these heroes paved the way for future generations of warriors, regardless of background, to serve in the finest military there was ever known. On behalf of a grateful nation, I thank you for your service and for your contribution to the cause of freedom at home and around the world. May God bless our men and women in uniform, and may God bless the United States of America. Signed, Barack Obama.
Now, this is what they gave us.
We'll take pictures of these later on if you don't mind, sir.
Yeah.
So this is certificate of recognition from the National Moffett Point Marine Association, and this is for Morris Dogan Craig. It says, in recognition of honorable service during the period of 1942 to 1949, while promoting peace and stability for the United States of America during World War II, the people of this nation are forever grateful. In a unanimous and bipartisan vote by the member of 112th Congress of the United States, the Congressional Gold Medal Bill, H.R. 2447, was approved to be awarded to the first African American Marine recruits to enlist and attend boot camp at the segregated Camp Moffett Point, North Carolina. The 27 June 2012 award of the Congressional Gold Medal to the Moffett Point Marines was assigned to the President of the United States of America, President Barack Obama. The Congressional Gold Medal is the highest civilian honor bestowed by Congress for distinguished achievement. The Moffett Point Marines' dedicated contributions to perseverance, courage, and outstanding service on and off the battlefield has inspired social change in the United States Marine Corps and America. Therefore, be it known that the certificate identifies the recipient as having earned the title Moffett Point Marine. His devotion to duty reflects great credit upon him and is in keeping with the high tradition of the Marine Corps and United States Naval Service. Confirmed on the 21st day of January 2017. And this is from Mr. Forrest E. Spencer, National President of the Moffett Point Marine Association, and Mr. Eric W. Nelson, National Vice President of the Association.
So that's what I got for serving in Moffett Point.
So it's from the Marine Corps.
And then a third one, honestly, there's not, in my opinion, there's not enough recognition. But so this is a certificate of recognition presented once again to yourself, Mr. Craig. In recognition of selfless service and sacrifice, the United States Marine Corps proudly honors the legacy of the Moffett Point Marines. From 1942 to 1949, nearly 20,000 African American men joined the Marine Corps despite harsh contradictions between fighting for democracy overseas and the denial of civil rights at home. After completing arduous and segregated basic training at Moffett Point Camp, North Carolina, these Marines served with distinction during some of World War II's most challenging struggles in the Pacific. Some made the ultimate sacrifice, others continued their service to Korea and Vietnam and back home, and they continued fighting for civil rights. Moffett Point Marines are legends in the rich history of the Marine Corps. Choosing to put their lives on the line in service to the nation, they advanced the cause of civil rights and contributed to President Truman's decision to desegregate the armed forces in 1948, 64 years later. The 112th United States Congress awarded the Congressional Gold Medal as the highest expression of national appreciation to the Moffett Point Marines for patriotism and distinguished achievement. Collectively, all Moffett Point Marines helped pave the way for many men and women of ethnicities and background who serve today in the military. Semper Fidelis, and God bless the Moffett Point Marines. This is signed from Joan Neller, Commandant of the Marine Corps, 37th Commandant of the Marine Corps, who personally knows. I think he's a great man.
So that's what I got for being in the Moffett Point.
So the gold medal, the Congressional Gold Medal. I remember that moment. I wasn't there personally, but I was a young sergeant, and I remember seeing pictures and some videos.
Yeah.
And that was one of the first times I actually knew that the Marine Barracks Washington D.C. existed, unfortunately. But how did it feel to wait nearly 64 years for recognition?
Yeah, that's right. That's all. At least they recognize us.
Right.
I thought they'd forgotten us. Because most of the guys that served had died. Took so long, you know.
Yeah.
They died off, you know. And when my son heard about this, and he took my discharge and everything down there, and he just gave him a award. He's living. We can't find men living.
Right. I think it's rather short of incredible, the fact that I think even up till about a year or 2 years ago, we were still finding living Moffett Point Marines that remain very much anonymous through it all.
That's my boot camp.
So here's a picture of this is Platoon 98, correct?
Yeah, 98.
So
that's our basketball team. We came out of service and won championship in the system.
This is the Marine Corps team, or
yeah,
really?
We called it Mohawk. And let me show you how I remember Moffett Point. Was it just my brother? He was the Moffett Point. Babe Miller in Mumford Point. He was Jim Foster in Mumford Point. And of course, Mr. Branham and Mr. Street. Yeah, the recreation department used to call us the Marines.
Right.
Because we all had ex-Marines. And we won the basketball championship that year.
That's pretty amazing, huh?
Yeah.
I know that there was ability to box. I didn't know it was a basketball team. And that's pretty the Mohawks. Huh.
And here's his signature.
It was a 54th
51st
patch. And then I think
yeah, those ribbons.
Pacific. I think I see some other ones here.
Yeah.
So, and then that's your discharge paperwork over here.
Mm-hmm. And that is a puzzle I had to put together.
This poster is nice. This is actually pretty cool. I've yet to have the opportunity to actually see a boot camp photo.
Oh yeah, that boot camp photo. That's it.
So one thing I'm actually curious about is I've heard stories about this from other Mount Point Marines, is that you're in platoon 98, but your drill instructors weren't white; they were black. So
no, yeah.
I heard stories. A lot of guys would graduate from boot camp, turn around and become instructors for the next platoon.
Yeah,
that's true.
Yeah. All the instructors was black.
Mm-hmm.
Because this in my time, because the guys that went to forward with me, I don't know what they had. You know, I was in 98 now. We had the guys in our outfit, the 21st, that they had probably had white instructors. You know.
Really? So, wait, you said before or after you graduated?
Yeah, this was after the war. And we had black sergeants were DI.
Yeah.
Drill instructor.
Your DIs were black.
Yeah.
And I always thought it was interesting that.
So.
Except outside the officer.
The earlier ones probably had white ones.
I heard in a lot of the earlier platoons it was. I got Hashmark Johnson, for example.
Yeah.
He enlisted and automatically became an NCO to teach Marines.
Hashmark was one of the main guys down there.
So I thought it was interesting that a lot of the first black drill instructors.
They call him Hashmark because he spent time in the Navy, and then he joined the Marine Corps. So they won't know how he get a Hashmark in the 40s.
Right.
When the Marine Corps just started.
Right.
And then he explained to it, I was in the Navy first.
Yeah.
So they call him hash mark, because he got a hash mark for being in the Marine Corps, for being in the service for over 4 years.
That's just truly amazing, sir. That is true. This is actually a lot of history.
Yeah.
So, like I said, so you were there in 2012 at the barracks in D.C. and you were getting the medal. How did that feel to finally be formally recognized some 60 years later?
How you be recognized?
Yeah, how did it feel to finally get that recognition?
Oh, I feel like a king. I feel like a king being recognized this late. Yeah, I feel great. Say that to somebody, because I used to tell the guys, what you doing in the war? I was in World War II, Marine Corps. You was in the Marine Corps. What outfit? They told me they heard about this 51st, that medal we got.
Right.
They heard about, you was in the 51st? How old are you? I said, I'm 97, yeah.
Right.
And they couldn't believe when the president passed that bill, my son took the papers down there, they gave me a certificate just like that.
Mm-hmm.
I was saying, oh yeah, you definitely are.
You're definitely
remember for me.
I think that's still very tremendous. I went to boot camp in 2006.
Yeah.
So very much many years later. And I remember one thing that stuck out for me was if you look at a command board, you see your officers and you see your sergeant majors. And one thing that always stuck out to me when I was a recruit and a PFC and stuff like that was the officer was white, so the colonel was a white guy, and then the sergeant major was a black guy, and that just you're coming commander or you're as a captain was a white guy, and then the first sergeant black guy. It just seemed like that was always the trend. I remember they get together all the recruits and say, hey, like in this room, There's going to be colonels in here. There's going to be sergeant majors. There's going to be captains, lieutenants, and there's going to be first sergeants and master gunnery sergeants and so on and so forth. And I remember looking at my buddy, forget his name. I want to say it was like Colton or something like that. But we looked at each other and it was like, you know, we just want to be gunnery sergeants. We just want to be like first sergeants. And it wasn't because that the leadership was exemplary. It was because we just assumed we had to follow in his footsteps. And at the time, the Sergeant Major of the Marine Corps, Sergeant Major John Estrada. Yeah. And this man looked amazing. I met him after I graduated boot camp in San Francisco. And he had Bravos that were just creased and had the sharpest, and everything looked about him was just amazing. I was like, I want to be a Sergeant Major. Yeah. I was dead set in my career is just, I want to be a Sergeant Major. And then it wasn't until a few years later where I had some NCOs, some great NCOs, that pulled me aside and said, hey, you know what? I see what you want to do. Yeah. This is where you need to go. And they really looked at me and not gravitated, but influenced me to look at OCS and pursue a commission. And one thing I really thought about was that, you know, I didn't know at the time. I didn't know Frederick Branch. I didn't think being an officer was a reality. Mm-hmm. You know, because the officer corps is still very much comprised of white people, white men. But I think once I caught wind of what the Mark Point Marines were about and the legacy, I said I had to do this. Mm-hmm. And it's not to say I had to do it because I wanted to show it, but it's because you guys set the standard and the ability for me to do so. Mm-hmm. And I'm very fortunate in my career for things I've done. But I remember about 3 years ago, I was out on the Marine Expeditionary Unit, and we stopped in the Middle East in Bahrain. And a couple of young corporals came up to me and they said, and I was still a lieutenant at the time, but they came up to me and they said, "Sir, we're really happy to see you here, and we're really happy to have you represent." Yeah. And I asked myself, like, what do you guys mean? Like, here, let me buy you a drink and celebrate the Marine Corps birthday. Like, let's have some celebration. And they told me, "Sir, like, we're very happy to have you here because we see you, you know, as a black officer. We see enough stuff to realize that you're not just, you know, some guy from the Naval Academy or some guy off the street, but you are somebody that's done some time, and you came from the same background. You know, like you started from the enlisted ranks and you rose up to where you are." And they were happy, and they told me that, and I still remember this. They were happy to see me and know that it was possible. And in the same light, when I meet you guys and I see you guys, I'm very much honored to be in the presence of Mark Point Marines because...
Well, I didn't know what we had done until after the war. See, we accepted it, but when President Obama got this thing, he got the pass, you got to get these guys some kind of respect. So that was more important. Came in all black, you know.
It truly is tremendous.
I was telling people I work on the job. I retired from the district, from the government too, you know.
Right.
Federal government, 30 years. And I used to tell people, I was in the Marine Corps. They put it in my, oh yeah, you were, huh? I mean, I was in the Marine Corps during the war.
Right.
Wait a minute. You say you was in the Marine Corps during the war. Wait a minute. We had blacks in there. We had no lieutenants, no captains, no colonels. We all was sergeants.
I think it's rather short of just like tremendous in terms, like you said. I met many Marines in my time, and I'm sure you've come across many Marines in your time as well. Mm-hmm. A World War II veteran is something to really respect. Yeah. And then, like I said, a black Marine that fought in World War II, with all due respect, like that's it's just nothing short of incredible to be.
Yeah, I applied for a job in the government, and put down your record. I put down a Marine Corps, and they used to come back and say, Craig, you were in the Marine Corps in 1946. In World War II? I said, yeah. He said, what? And I had to give them explanation that I did that.
Right.
Take my papers down there, let them show the papers were discharged when I was signed up and when I left.
But when you join the federal service, not the federal service, but
When I first went to the federal government, you know,
right.
it filled out that form, you know. Because I had run across those people a lot of times. They couldn't believe I was a World War II veteran
Really?
in the Marine Corps. So I got used to that. So, and I tell you, actually, and I got a lot of friends with me.
Mm-hmm.
You know? But when he passed that bill, that opened a big space for a lot of veterans and didn't understand who we are.
And I think that's one of the tragic things about it is that we as a country,
Yeah.
I think if you look at the Harlem Hellfighters from the Army or the Tuskegee Airmen
Yeah.
or the Montfort Point Marines, you guys made incredible sacrifices for this country. You know, at a time when the nation was really, you know, looking down on African Americans and holding us back, and you guys actively sought roles to go to fight overseas and defend, and you did it in such a manner.
I had to take this picture because let me a lot of times let them know that I did serve.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because they didn't believe my words. I said, I was trying to figure what outfit I was in, where I trained. And they said, oh yeah. When people was, they mean black guys, you used to win the war, after the war, you know.
Right.
They didn't know nothing about the Black Marines. They didn't know about Montfort Point. They were drafted, first guys in the Korean War, you know.
Right, yeah.
They heard now and then, but they wasn't sure that was true. So I've been through a lot with explaining, and they say all the pictures I had, let them know.
I can imagine, sir. I really can, and like I said, like I can't imagine what it was like to actually even in like the experiences in the actual war itself.
Yeah,
just to come home and people not say be skeptical, but just to come home and people go, wait, and not to be dismissive, but just not believe, be disbelieved that you were in World War II. Like, yeah, I was in World War. Yes, I was in World War II. Like, why would you not believe that?
Yeah, I've been doing a lot of explaining, and my son, when he was talking about me, people didn't believe it. So, oh, you trying to build your father up. I had to take him, show him pictures. Did people see that was actually true?
Right.
So it took me time to get people used to it. So when the Montfort Point thing came out, I said, man, a lot of my friends had gone. I wish they had still around to explain what we went through.
That's the unfortunate part of it. Like I said,
yeah.
Like to go 6 decades without actually being able to not necessarily boast about your service, but to be formally acknowledged for, hey, look what we did as pioneers in terms of civil rights, as pioneers in terms of military.
See, I had no. I'm from a large family. It was 10 in my family, 5 boys and 5 girls.
Okay.
And when I went to high school, they said, you ROTC. My father said, I can't buy no uniform for you. I got to feed these kids.
Right, yeah.
So I never had no military training before Marine Corps. You know, this all was new to me.
Mm-hmm.
But I knew he had to follow order. So I did that.
Well, like I said, my hat's off to you, and I and the Marine Corps, I think the nation owes you and every single one of you guys that passed through Montfort Point a great deal of respect for the sacrifice you made. I mean,
well, thank you a lot.
I do believe that, it was at that time, understand like the nation was at war with Japan and Germany.
Yeah.
People were being drafted, but the Army and Navy was already at service for a lot. Black men.
Hey, wait, I showed him that airman when this day. Oh, y'all got a citation, didn't you? I said, yeah.
But as
even after the black guys came in later, appreciate that.
Mm-hmm. And like I said, sir, I think it says something about you as a man, as just not about as just as a man to say, you know what, I'm gonna join the Marine Corps. I think a lot of people.
My point is, but you still around?
Mm-hmm.
You're 97, still around. So most of the guys I know in this picture are long dead, you know, and they have a chance to explain their part, you know. So they gave it to the medal, gold medal and the certificate to the wife. I didn't know the guy's wives.
Right.
So
That's like I said, that's part of the tragedy of it that
Yeah.
we went so long before
yeah,
acknowledging.
yeah. So long before they acknowledge us, you know. So you see what I'm going through.
But
Thanks a lot.
Right,
When
listen.
people say, hit me in the back, say thank you, I say, you don't know what you're talking about? Yeah, I know what I'm talking about. I'm glad you served. Some of them, you know, then some of them say, you sure you're right? I still got to explain to you during the World War II that I was in the Marine Corps.
right.
You say you was in the Marine Corps in World War II? I said, sure was.
Well,
I just stopped telling them, you know.
I would say that I call myself a quasi military history like buff. You know, I think that I know a little bit of things, but I would say World War II was a turning point in terms of civil rights and civil relations for a lot of minorities or disenfranchised groups such as women. But I think it just says a lot about you and a lot about the 20,000 other black men that joined the Marine Corps.
Yeah.
When I joined, when I enlisted, I didn't think my race mattered. You know,
Yeah.
not necessarily in
I was 19 years old.
But,
I ain't know nothing about. Or I knew there was the Army, Navy, and Marine Corps. They had, but all us we got together and we talked the things over. We said this job, we made it.
Well, like I said, sir, like it's truly an honor to be in the presence of a World War II veteran and one that served in one of the most famed units during World War II.
Yeah.
I'm sure that there are some planes still hanging around in the South Pacific that are very much because of you guys' actions out there. So
yeah, that picture when we won that championship and they took a picture. You guys said, Frank DePaul, oh, those are Marines. Because there were four of us in that. And he goes, y'all live Muffin Point. And all of them dead,
unfortunately.
But they didn't get a chance to appreciate this Muffin Point anniversary.
I think, as an individual, all I can do is tell your story and tell the stories of those that have gone before you.
Yeah.
But your legacy lives on in every single African American Marine that has served and is serving and will serve in the future. And like I said, I owe you a debt of gratitude, just as much as those Marines said to me a few years ago.
Yeah.
But I hope we continue this legacy and continue this strength because.
Yeah, I stopped telling people, that what we did and what we didn't do, and we went through. Oh yeah, we won still. So, of course, that time, the Army had Tuskegee.
Right.
Everybody knew who.
Everybody, yeah, because the Fly Boys, yeah.
Yeah, everybody knew it. And see, then I had a brother that died in the Navy during World War II in Port Chicago.
Yeah.
See, it was five boys, three in the Navy and 2 in the Marine Corps. So the one in the Navy, he got killed in that explosion in Port Chicago back in the 40s.
Okay, yeah, I've heard of the Port Chicago explosion with the
And
ammunition.
my older brother was single too. And my younger brother was a priest. He died a few years ago. He was in the Navy. All of us was in the service. 5 of us. When you put a star in the window during the war, we had 4 stars in our window.
Oh.
All of us in the service. Except the younger one, because he was too young.
Mm-hmm.
The one that turned the priest. He was too young. Well, you had 4 stars in the window. He said, you got 4 sons in the service? And 2 in the Marine Corps and 2 in the Navy.
Well, I think it's a little special when it's the Marine Corps. I know the Navy does big things, but at the end of the day, we all know it's the Marine Corps that gets the job done, right?
So I was glad I was the only one left that's still alive, you know. And then everybody asked you, what's your secret? I said, it's a man of sayings called Jesus. I said, you have to ask him.
Mm-hmm.
He handled my life.
Amen to that. I know there's just been times where I looked up and I walked away from an event and I go like, how did I make it taught? It's like, someone says it's not your time. It's not your time.
Yeah. So that's my story.
Well, sir,
I'm happy to be around, but it makes me happy when somebody understand what I went through and what happened. Pat me on the back, think you did a good job. I said, you know what you're talking about. Yes, I do. I know you fought that war. Then they told me, yeah, we had to fight the Japs and the White Marines.
Right.
Because they didn't believe we did that. We wear that uniform for, you know?
That's still that's I think that's probably one of our nation's failings is the fact that we weren't accepting it back then, you know?
Yeah.
To volunteer and then still be held down.
So we had to fight two wars. We had to fight the segregation war and the Japanese war. And you go into the station, you get a ticket. What kind of outfit you got on? So Marine go, what? That's what the cashier, they ain't never seen no black Marine.
Right.
They don't know what the black Marine, because as far as we got out of North Carolina, everybody in North Carolina knew black Marines, but people in New York and New Jersey they didn't know there was black Marines.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so we had went through a lot of explaining to do.
Well, the explaining you did, sir, like I said, it blazed trails for generations on generations and generations of Marines to serve.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I always look back at World War II and I said that's just tremendous what America did as a collective effort. And I think, you know, the African American community to even, you know, answer the call and say, you know what, I'm going to join the service and I'm going to fight for this country on behalf.
Yeah.
Like,
I told him, I say 90 years old with no further training and get to go to the outfit that did something. I live with that every day. People don't understand, but I do.
Well, I as much as I wish I could scream and shout to the world. The story of my former Marines. I hope that this interview does give people a little bit more insight into the legacy you have set forth.
Uh-huh.
So, do appreciate your time, sir.
Well, thank you for the interview, because a lot of people don't understand what you got your chest out for. What have you done? Nothing.
A lot of people don't appreciate the fact that this country would be a lot different had you guys not done what you've done.
And I had young people come to me and say, thank you for what you've done. Some of them read the history, you know. And it surprised me that some of them really knew what was going on. But a lot of them didn't know what was going on.
Mm-hmm.
You was in service, you was in World War II. So everybody's in World War II. They didn't know. But I was in the Marine Corps. What? Oh, that's different.
It's always a little bit different when people say Marines. I'll tell you, I've seen that firsthand. Like, we as Marines, we know it.
Yeah,
We're very much a humble branch. We're like, oh, okay, we're Marines,
yeah.
The way the world sees us, like, you're a Marine, like, wow, you know.
So I appreciate this interview, and I hope people understand what I live with, what I've been through this stuff. So I know the people who some of them don't understand, but some do. Some of them do.
My job, or not my job, but my goal here is make just a little more people understand.
Yeah. So understand what we did and why we did it, and that we glad that we did it. You know, that's what I feel about it.
Simplify. I really respect that, sir.
So I thank you for this interview. It helps me day by day. I sit here day by day, and look at television, sit on the porch. People say, "How you feeling today, Mr. Craig?" Some say, "Yeah, you know, he's on here." When I say I was in World War II, they stopped me. "Oh, you were World War II? You still around?"
Yes, damn it, I'm still around. I'll go when I please.
So that's what I'll go through. So I'm glad to tell somebody how I feel. I feel what I did was the right thing, and didn't have no hard feeling over how I got it. Just I got it.
Well, I'll tell you what, it was definitely the right thing, and you know, no hard feelings about it. But without you, sir, without 298 and without the 51st Battalion,
Yeah.
like I can't even imagine how different the Marine Corps would be, or how different America would be, or just how different the Black community would be without you guys setting that standard and saying we're gonna be Black Marines.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I appreciate that. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, sir.
I want to extend my deepest gratitude to Mr. Craig and our listeners for today's podcast. The ability to sit down and converse with these men is dependent upon many factors. While most of the Montford Point Marines have been identified, there are many men still left unaccounted for, and the National Association strives to identify these Marines or their families so they can receive the recognition they deserve. If you know of a relative who may have been a Montford Point Marine and has not been recorded in official archives, please reach out to us at MontfordPointMarines.com. The National Montford Point Marine Association exists to preserve the legacy, and this can only be achieved with participation from younger generations. If you've never considered it, I encourage any active duty veteran, regardless of branch of service, race, religion, or creed, to join our organization. Details on how to do so, or to contribute to our cause, is in the description. I sincerely hope you enjoyed the first podcast, and I invite you to stay tuned for our next interview with Staff Sergeant Eugene Groves. Semper Fi.